Picture this: 6 a.m. on a crisp Colorado morning, the kind where every lawn in Willow Creek Estate sparkles like it's been photoshopped. A gleaming black SUV screeches to a halt outside my gate, and out steps Victoria Lang, HOA president, ex-corporate lawyer, and self-appointed queen of perfection, in 4-inch designer heels that have never tasted real dirt. She waves a thick stack of violation notices like they're winning lottery tickets while a crew of hired goons with hedge trimmers and herbicide sprayers fans out behind her. "This eyesore ends today, Mr. Caldwell," she announces with that syrupy smile that never reaches her eyes. "Your little farm is destroying property values for everyone." My late wife Emily's apple orchard, the one we planted together the summer before the cancer diagnosis, the humming beehives we tended like babies, and the 6 happy chickens scratching in their coop all about to be erased because Victoria decided authenticity was a crime. What she didn't realize: everything she could see from the street was pure theater. The real operation hummed invisibly just 200 yards behind a ridge of mature pine she'd never bothered to look past. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 55, widower, and the last living soul who still remembers when this land wasn't sliced into identical McMansions with covenants thicker than the Bible. My grandfather bought these 3 acres in 1958, long before Willow Creek Estates sprouted in 2018 like a bad rash on former pasture. The house sits on the original lot with an agricultural exemption older than Victoria's law degree. Emily and I spent 32 years turning the backyard into a little slice of heaven: dwarf apple trees heavy with fruit, pollinator gardens bursting with wildflowers, and beehives that produce the best honey this side of the Rockies. After she passed 2 years ago, those trees and bees became my lifeline. Every morning I'd walk the rows, talking to her like she could still hear me through the leaves. Nothing fancy, just honest work that kept me sane and put jars of honey on neighbors' doorsteps for free. Most folks in Willow Creek were decent. Young families chasing the suburban dream, retirees wanting quiet streets. But every neighborhood has its Victoria. She rolled in 6 months after the first houses sold. Fresh from Denver, trading skyscrapers for rural charm, she immediately set about sterilizing. Manicured nails, German luxury SUV worth more than my truck, and a voice that could weaponize the word community. Her house sat 800 yards from my back fence, but apparently that was still too close to real life. The first certified letter arrived 3 weeks after she unpacked. "Livestock odors and insect hazards are negatively impacting resale values," it read. I laughed at first. 6 chickens and a few thousand bees quieter than her yappy Pomeranian. I pulled every zoning record, grandfather clause, and exemption I could find. My land predated their HOA by 60 years. But Victoria wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in winning. The nuisance complaint came next, claiming my bees posed a public health threat, and the chickens created unsanitary conditions, worse than her weekly nail salon visits. Then the emergency board meeting she packed with residents who'd never stepped foot on anything wilder than a golf course. Victoria's performance was Oscar material. Tears in her eyes about protecting our children from allergens, dramatic pauses about plummeting property values, all while the scent of her expensive perfume clashed with the honest smell of fresh hay I'd spread that morning. The local paper ran the headline, "Local Man Refuses to Compromise with Neighbors," and painted me as the grumpy old holdout. A temporary restraining order slapped a 50-foot buffer zone across my own backyard. 3 apple trees and 2 hives had to go to auction for pennies. 12 grand vanished overnight while Victoria smiled from her kitchen window, like she just won the lottery. The neighborhood split faster than a cheap fence in a windstorm. The hardware store started losing Willow Creek customers. The coffee shop developed invisible battle lines. Old-timers nodding at me in support, newcomers whispering about modern standards. Old Mr. Ruiz at the feed store would slip me extra chicken feed under the counter and mutter, "Keep fighting, Ethan." Some of us remember when neighbors minded their own damn business. Meanwhile, Victoria launched her social media crusade, protecting our families from agricultural hazards, with filtered photos of my peaceful bees captioned like they were Africanized killer swarms. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about bees or chickens. This was about control. Victoria moved to the country but wanted the city sanitized and delivered on a silver platter. She'd picked the wrong widower to mess with. While she was busy filing paperwork on my visible front yard, I'd already started watching. Quietly. Patiently. Security cameras I'd installed after the first complaint captured everything. Not just my decoy setup, but the hidden expansion I'd begun the week after Emily's funeral. Behind the ridge where the pines blocked every view from the street, I'd quietly moved the bulk of the operation. 40 more hives, expanded orchard rows, and a greenhouse that produced organic produce I sold direct to restaurants under a separate LLC. The visible coop and 3 trees were bait, designed to keep her focused on the obvious while the real value grew out of sight. Victoria thought she was fighting a broken man with a hobby. She had no idea she was declaring war on ground she couldn't even see. Her next move proved she'd done her homework. While I was dealing with the buffer zone, she dug through county records and discovered my small-scale apiary permit had lapsed during Emily's final months, when I was spending 18-hour days at the hospital instead of pushing paper. The county notice arrived Thursday morning. 30 days to upgrade or shut down. $18,000 I didn't have after the legal bleeding. The smell of burnt toast filled my empty kitchen as I stared at the letter. Victoria had weaponized bureaucracy itself. But here's what my late father, a county clerk for 40 years, taught me. When they attack you with rules, you drown them in their own. 2 could play the late-night records game. While Victoria probably celebrated with mimosas, I spent evenings under flickering fluorescent lights in the county clerk's office. Mrs. Alvarez, the 70-year-old records guardian, would slide me extra coffee and whisper, "Sometimes the old files bite back, Mijo." Victoria's property records were a gold mine. That rustic stone wall she bragged about in the neighborhood newsletter sat 4 feet over the setback line. Clear code violation. Her backyard landscape lighting blasted into the night sky, violating dark sky ordinances. Even her infinity pool required environmental permits she'd never bothered to get. I filed 3 counter-complaints the next morning, each one meticulously documented with photos and timestamps. The sound of my printer spitting out evidence felt like the first note of a symphony she'd never heard coming. 2 weeks later, her husband David showed up at my back door at sunset, looking like he'd aged 10 years. He glanced around nervously before whispering, "She's leveraged to the hilt on the house. Second mortgage, max cards. Those property values have to stay inflated, or we lose everything." Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening. The truth crystallized. Victoria wasn't just bored and petty. She was desperate. Desperate people get sloppy. And sloppy was exactly what I needed. Sure enough, the retaliation hit like clockwork. An anonymous tip to the IRS claiming I ran an unreported business triggered an audit. Senior citizens she'd recruited started filing noise complaints about dawn rooster crows. Never mind, my birds were all hens. She organized a petition drive at her house with catered finger foods and glossy brochures that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. While she hosted anti-orchard rallies, I kept digging in those old files. And what I found made everything else look like child's play. The original 1958 deed included subsurface mineral rights, gravel and limestone deposits, that extended under the entire Willow Creek development. My grandfather had filed the claims in the 1890s before the land was even subdivided. Modern surveys had missed it because nobody bothered to check territorial era documents. Mrs. Alvarez helped me locate the yellowed maps that smelled like history itself. "Your abuelo was smarter than these newcomers," she said with a wink. Those rights weren't just paper. They were leverage. Quiet geological surveys using equipment borrowed from an old college buddy confirmed limestone deposits worth roughly $3.2 million in extraction value. Every time Victoria walked past my fence taking photos for her next complaint, she was standing on ground I could legally tear up. The crunch of survey stakes going into the earth sounded like the tables turning, though she still had no clue. But Victoria wasn't done. Her sabotage started with my beehives. One morning the water troughs tasted like bleach and death. The county inspector found a suspicious chemical residue. "This just proves his operation threatens our groundwater," Victoria announced at the next board meeting with fake concern dripping from every syllable. Forced to truck in water for the hives cost $200 a day while my savings hemorrhaged. But those hidden cameras I'd installed months earlier caught something beautiful. Victoria's teenage son sneaking through the fence at 2 a.m., dumping industrial cleaner like a suburban saboteur. Rather than rush to the sheriff, I remembered what Emily always said. Patience cuts deeper than any blade. Sheriff Ramirez looked at the footage in his coffee-scented office and nodded slowly. Sometimes you let the small fish swim so you can net the shark. I requested a private meeting with Victoria at the sheriff's station. Neutral ground. The nervous click of her heels on linoleum echoed down the hallway as I slid the printed screenshots across the table. Timestamps, clear video of her son's expensive mountain bike, the whole thing. Her coffee cup trembled in perfectly manicured hands. "Stop the harassment," I said quietly, "or this goes to the prosecutor as felony vandalism." 3 blessed weeks of silence followed. Victoria made public statements about finding common ground. My chickens grazed peacefully. Restaurant orders for honey picked up. For a moment it felt like the nightmare might end. But Karen, sorry Victoria, was using that quiet like a chess master planning checkmate. While I enjoyed the false peace, she unearthed an obscure county ordinance about commercial equipment parking. My old farm truck, parked in the same spot for 15 years, suddenly became illegal. The petition campaign resumed with professional intensity. She formed the Willow Creek Preservation Committee, recruiting wealthy newcomers who pledged cash for endless legal war. Professional signs appeared. Family values over farm smells. Local TV ran stories about changing suburban communities, with concerned parents who'd never lived anywhere more rural than a Denver cul-de-sac. That's when my surveyor friend Jake called me at midnight. "Ethan, you need to see this." His GPS screen glowed green in the dark. The original 1958 survey had an error. My fence line sat 50 feet inside my actual boundary, meaning Victoria's prize rose garden and half her infinity pool sat entirely on my land. 70 years of innocent mistake, now corrected by modern technology. Every time she'd photographed my eyesore from her side, she'd been trespassing. The irony tasted sweeter than Emily's apple pie. The psychological warfare intensified. Victoria began daily power walks past my gate, phone camera rolling, dragging different neighbors to build her coalition. I watched from my kitchen window, morning coffee in hand, feeling the shift. She had no idea those rose bushes she babbied for Instagram were about to become Exhibit A in a trespassing lawsuit that would flip our war upside down. Victoria went nuclear. She filed an EPA complaint claiming my orchard runoff threatened the entire watershed. Hired an environmental lawyer from Denver at $25,000. Money the HOA somehow scraped together despite members threatening to quit. The federal inspector arrived in full hazmat gear like he was raiding a chemical plant instead of checking a few beehives. Newspapers ran federal probe of local orchard, with photos that made my peaceful yard look like a toxic waste site. 60 days of quarantine. No sales. No income. Bank calls started with that special tone that means we need to talk. But sometimes angels wear hazmat suits. Dear Elena Vargas, the EPA scientist, spent weeks testing and found zero contamination. "Your operation is cleaner than most city parks," she told me privately while packing gear. She'd seen HOAs weaponize federal processes before. She slipped me the number of agricultural rights attorneys who specialized in these ambushes. The metallic smell of her equipment mixed with the first real taste of vindication. That's when my lawyer, Janet Morales, found Victoria's fatal error. In the EPA filing, Victoria had submitted falsified data claiming runoff levels 400% higher than reality. A federal crime carrying 2 years and a $100,000 fine. Desperate people do stupid things. Victoria had just handed me the rope. Learning the EPA case was closing with full exoneration, Victoria made her last desperate play. A restraining order claiming I'd threatened agricultural terrorism, whatever that meant, based on menacing statements. Sheriff Ramirez reluctantly took my hunting rifles as precaution while Victoria performed Oscar-worthy fear on the courthouse steps. The cosmic joke was perfect. While she orchestrated that final theater, I was ready to show her what she'd really been fighting all along. The visible orchard and coop she'd obsessed over? Pure decoy. The real operation, 60 hives, expanded orchard, greenhouse producing 5 figures in restaurant contracts, had been quietly relocated behind the ridge during those mysterious nighttime movements neighbors gossiped about. While she filed complaints about the bait, my actual business hummed invisibly 200 yards from her rose garden. But the real bomb was the mineral rights. My subsurface claims extended under every house in Willow Creek Estates. Limestone quarrying potential worth $3.2 million that would require environmental impact studies shutting down construction and roads indefinitely. Victoria had spent 18 months trying to destroy an operation while sitting on ground I legally owned beneath her feet. Janet spread the documents across my kitchen table like battle plans. Ethan, you've been sitting on a nuclear option. The conservation easement I'd quietly granted 3 years ago to the Colorado Agricultural Heritage Foundation, in exchange for unlimited legal funding, meant every dollar Victoria forced me to spend was reimbursed by people who made careers crushing exactly her kind of harassment. Dear. Vargas's report praised my practices as a model of sustainable agriculture. The county commissioner quietly admitted the entire agricultural community was now behind me. You attack one legacy property, you attack all of us. The strategy was ruthless and beautiful. Simultaneous lawsuits for trespass, harassment, easement violations, and Victoria's federal fraud charges. We'd seek injunctive relief freezing all HOA enforcement, while demanding she personally pay my legal fees under Colorado's vexatious litigant statute. Force her to fight on every front until her over-leveraged finances collapsed. While she hosted another emergency meeting demanding a special assessment of $3,200 per household, 6 families refused outright. Heated arguments echoed through the community hall, as neighbors finally saw the woman who'd turned their quiet street into a war zone. Victoria's desperation peaked when she took a second mortgage and hired another PR firm for $8,000 a month to spin her narrative. I maintained radio silence and let the federal investigators do their work. The satisfying crunch of hay under my boots became my daily soundtrack, while criminal charges brewed in courtrooms she didn't even know existed. The community finally snapped at the hardware store when 3 Willow Creek residents demanded the owner remove his "Support Local Farms" signs. I chose sides 70 years ago, he told them while mixing paint that smelled like fresh hope. His business dipped with newcomers but exploded with old-timers who remembered what real neighbors looked like. Victoria crossed into outright criminality with anonymous animal welfare complaints that triggered state inspections, only for the vet to declare my flock healthier than most suburban pets. Then came the fence cuts and paint dumped on feed troughs. Night vision cameras caught her son red-handed again, this time with bolt cutters and spray paint. The twist? Victoria herself had called in the vandalism claiming unknown perpetrators, until the footage proved her own kid was the culprit. The harassment injunction landed with 47 documented violations. Criminal charges for false reports joined the vandalism and trespass counts against her son. Property damage totaling $3,400 plus fees that would drain whatever equity remained in their mortgaged McMansion. Regional media smelled blood. Historic property under siege by HOA overreach headlined agricultural magazines, while Save the Orchard trended with people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Victoria's PR firm pushed counter-narratives about dangerous rural elements, but authentic grassroots support drowned the manufactured outrage. Her nuclear option was pure breakdown. She petitioned county commissioners for eminent domain claiming a public health emergency. 7 commissioners rejected it unanimously, their faces showing open disgust. For sale signs started sprouting across Willow Creek like dandelions. Families fled the neighborhood now notorious for endless litigation. Real estate agents quietly steered clients away. Moving trucks became the new soundtrack as Victoria's war destroyed the exact property values she claimed to protect. The devastating final twist came from her own neighbors. 3 Willow Creek homeowners approached me privately wanting to sell before values cratered further. Their houses had become the litigation zone no buyer wanted. The irony was so perfect it felt like Emily laughing from somewhere beyond the trees. Victoria's personal apocalypse unfolded in slow motion. Her husband filed for divorce citing financial ruin and destructive behavior. The HOA board stripped her of the presidency in a no-confidence vote. Her real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Foreclosure notices appeared on the door that once sported prize-winning wreaths. Desperation drove her to character assassination, hiring a private investigator to spread whispers about Emily's death and insurance money. Anonymous flyers suggested I'd lost my mind since becoming a widower. The cheap ink smell of those lies mixed with grocery store gossip until even her remaining supporters recoiled. My response was dignified silence that let her hysteria speak for itself. Janet issued defamation cease and desist, while the community rallied with character letters money couldn't buy. Pastor Williams preached on bearing false witness that Sunday, church bells ringing with collective disgust. Victoria's final gambit was breaking into my property at midnight to sabotage the visible coop, planning to damage irrigation then claim it proved contamination. But motion sensors uploaded live footage straight to my phone. I let her finish the crime before calling authorities. Sheriff Ramirez arrived to find her red-handed with bolt cutters and spray cans, caught on crystal-clear 4K video no lawyer could spin. Criminal trespass, property destruction, and filing false reports about crimes she'd committed herself. A trifecta of felonies that ended her reign permanently. The arrest made front-page news. Victoria's mugshot showed disheveled hair and streaked mascara. The former suburban princess reduced to common criminal. Even her supporters turned away. A delegation of neighbors showed up at my gate with apology flowers and homemade cookies, voices shaking as they admitted how she'd manipulated them all. The legal avalanche buried her completely. Federal environmental fraud trial alongside state trespass charges. My civil suit demanded $143,000 in damages. House foreclosure and asset seizure finished the financial destruction. She moved in with distant relatives while former friends crossed the street to avoid her. But the sweetest irony was geological. Those mineral rights weren't just leverage. The environmental studies required for any quarrying created permanent buffers that protected my entire operation forever. Any future development in Willow Creek now needed my written approval. I'd gained veto power over the neighborhood that tried to erase me. The town hall meeting was standing room only. Cameras rolled as I calmly dismantled every accusation with GPS surveys, lab reports, and federal endorsements. Victoria appeared with a court-appointed public defender, rambling about protecting families from agricultural extremism. When Janet revealed the mineral rights extending under every home, spontaneous applause erupted. Standing ovation. Willow Creek residents publicly apologized. New HOA leadership pledged cooperation. The county passed agricultural heritage protections inspired by our fight. Federal court sentenced Victoria to 18 months for fraud. State charges added 2 more years. She lost everything: license, house, marriage, freedom. I watched from the courthouse steps as the transport van doors slammed shut on the consequences of her obsession. The settlement money became the Emily Caldwell Memorial Scholarship for young farmers. Conservation groups designated my property a heritage preserve. The visible decoy orchard still stands as a reminder that sometimes the smallest bait catches the biggest sharks. The real operation thrives behind the ridge, humming with life Victoria could never control. 1 year later, prosperity fills the air with the sweet smell of apples and honey. Tourism brings visitors who want authentic experiences the old HOA tried to erase. The neighborhood is healing. Monthly potlucks, shared harvests, real community instead of covenants. But the greatest victory wasn't money or land. It was proving that patience and truth outlast bullying when people finally remember what neighbors are supposed to be. So here's the question that keeps me up at night, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Was I wrong for defending my wife's legacy with every legal tool I had? Or was Victoria the real villain for turning a homeowners association into her personal weapon of mass destruction? Who truly crossed the line here? The man protecting his land, or the woman who thought rules gave her the right to destroy lives? Drop your verdict below. Let's settle this once and for all.